Lieutenant Commander Ziggler had sent out a message for Ensign Quinn and Lieutenant Gemini to join him in what Tan had said was their command area. It was a lot different than a Starfleet design, but nothing that they could not get used to. As he waited for them to join him, he walked around the area, getting a feel for the seats, controls, and overall ambience of the place. The forward screens showed a remarkable view of space, and according to what the Elixir had told him, could show all angles of the ship through either full or split-screen views. There had been a lot of changes in a short amount of time, and he hoped that the rest of the crew were up to it as much as he was. Rodger was taking in the report from his last security detail when his comm badge chirped and he was asked to meet with Lieutenant Ziggler in the command area. He left final instructions for the teams and left, hurrying to meet with the senior officer. A few minutes later, he entered the command area. "You asked to see me, sir?" Hal looked up from the controls of his chair, still trying to get used to the reading.
Ah, Ensign. Please, have a seat.
Hal looked around for an appropriate place for Quinn to sit, then decided to leave it up to him. Romeda was sitting at the navigational station, taking lessons from a very patient Tan, when she received the summons. After pressing a button at the end of the chair's arm to end the simulation and reorient the chair, she excused herself and stepped out of the alcove in the command interface. Piloting the ship was, as she was discovering, a wild ride, as the station's chair hovered, seemingly independent of the rest of the ship. Tan constantly warned her that being the navigator of a Pauldron-class ship was a specialist job. Gemini repeatedly responded blithely that that was quite all right, as she was, indeed, a specialist. Nonetheless, the idea of being in any orientation that differed from the rest of the crew was taking a bit of getting used to. She walked around the large table in the center of the room where the other two officers waited.
Reporting.
Good. We're all here. How's the training going?
Well, sitting in a chair that isn't connected to the ship is fun, and the interface is very intuitive.
Romeda glanced back over her shoulder at her station.
But so far I've only been running in simulations at the navigational level, so I haven't yet got a feel for how responsive the ship is at the tactical level. I'm told that it is a very different system.
I imagine it would be.
Hal replied as he turned to look at Quinn.
And how are things in the security department?
"They are difficult, sir," Rodger replied, having carefully worded his thoughts. He took another moment to reflect on his report. "We have a very inexperienced team. Some of them are children not long out of the academy. Now, I know I'm only 24 myself, but at least I do have a few missions under my belt. They have none. Nothing. Don't get me wrong, they're keen, and they'll carry out their duties and their orders to the very best of their abilities. But they need experience and training. I'll be setting up holodeck exercises to try to sharpen them up, but after that, it's up to them." Commander Ziggler nodded his understanding.
To be sure, things have been difficult. When I first boarded the Achilles, it was with a full crew complement. Now, we're working with what we have remaining. There aren't that many experienced officers available.
He looked at the two of them.
Romeda, I know you and have worked with you before. You're a pilot through and through, which is why I chose not to ask you to be my...
Hal paused as the looks he was getting told him he was getting ahead of himself.
Let me back up. I was able to communicate with Admiral Bain and explain our situation. He left me in charge with the rank of Lieutenant Commander and CO of this vessel. When I asked him about an executive officer, he said that it was entirely up to me.
He looked at Romeda.
Lieutenant Gemini, as a master of both flight and fighters, I'm going to need you in that position. I also want you as my second officer. I believe you should be able to handle both tasks without difficulties. Wouldn't you agree?
Romeda nodded, apparently not at all disappointed.
To be honest, when I heard about Murphy and Crux, I was worried that I was going to be made the XO. That level of command is something I'm not cut out for. Where I come from, commanders are born and bred, and so are pilots, and never the two paths cross.
When she turned to face Quinn, her smile was genuine.
Better you than me. Congratulations, Lieutenant,
she said as she offered her salute. Rodger looked with puzzlement at Romeda as she spoke, and it took several seconds for the meaning to dawn on him. Once it did, he pointed at his chest with his right index finger and said, "Me?" Still with the same stunned look, and still pointing at his chest, he looked at the CO. "I don't understand, sir."
It's quite simple. We need Lieutenant Gemini to handle her duties as the flight control operator. She is specially trained, and not just anyone can take over flying this ship. Not to mention working on finding out about squadron fighters. You've shown from the moment you arrived the kind of drive that I can use as my executive officer. With that comes the rank of lieutenant.
Rodger, still standing with index finger pointing at his chest, was still trying to comprehend the enormity of what the CO was saying. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Sir, he took a moment to regain his composure. Thank you for your vote of confidence in me, Captain. I'm honored, if not completely gobsmacked. Rodger eventually let out an embarrassed smile, but quickly covered it with his hand. Sorry, sir, this has really caught me unawares. Still, this is just the drive I need to carry out my duty. Hal smiled.
Your reaction is quite understandable. Of course, with the new rank and position, you will have considerably more responsibilities. We're in a new situation, a rather unprecedented one. But I believe that with the three of us working together, we will all get through it. As the saying goes, onward and upward.
He stood from his chair and extended his hand to each of them.
Congratulations to all of us.
Absolutely, sir. You most of all on your captaincy. Rodger shook the CO's hand, and then waited for him to shake Lieutenant Gemini's before offering her his own. Congratulations to you as well on your promotion, and on getting to pilot this wonderful new ship. It'll take some work to fly her, but from what I hear, you're the absolute best there is, so I'm sure we're in good hands.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Romeda beamed as she shook Quinn's hand.
I'll do my best. Just don't ask for any miracles. Well, not yet anyway.
Her eye was caught by a figure standing just inside the main doors into the room.
If you gentlemen will excuse me, Major Nesca has offered to keep me company while I look for the fighter bay.
Rodger nodded, then smiled his goodbye to the lieutenant.
Very good.
Hal looked at both lieutenants.
Dismissed.
Thank you, Captain, Rodger said, taking his leave. As he walked out of the command area, his heart was still racing at what had just happened. It felt almost surreal. Almost. However, it wasn't. And now came the hard work of putting the trust his commander had just shown him into practice. He was going to have to turn over Chief of Security in order to focus on his new position and the responsibilities thereof. And you sure don't get many days like this, he said to himself with a smile. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this narration, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Comments are always welcome, and complete credits can be found in the description below. Once again, thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for the next episode on the Starship Odysseus.